Wonderful. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and with the fact that we're heading into a very important year for climate, smart agriculture, as you mentioned, and what are some of our solutions need to be across as we work together in the sectors. So I'm going to ask Alain, I know we're aware of time, just to say for Alain and Siwa, we'll maybe cut our comments just a little bit so we get a little dialogue and the governor able to respond to us, and then we'll go to the Q&A. But thank you. Alain, please.
For me to speak faster, to speak in French, so I'll speak in English. Sorry. Thank you, Kerry, and thank you, Governor, for the picture you gave us on the energy. I think, yeah, I was prepared to speak about the nexus between water, food, and energy, and I think Claudia gave a fair credit to what we did on the challenge program on water and food on that issue. But maybe leading us to the issue of climate and how we better work on the connection between climate and agriculture. One thing we've discovered working on the water, food, energy nexus in the CGIAR program is that we have a lot to learn from what the private sector, especially the industry, has already put in place, for example, to value ecosystem services as a common ground, to gather people around the table, people who have never spoken to each other, people who are actually making fragmented decisions. For example, they decide to build a dam because the priority for the development of a given country, for example, Laos, is energy. Because this is potentially 30% of the GDP. So the only way for them to get rid of the poverty and food insecurity is to develop hydropower. But at the same time, this can jeopardize fisheries and irrigation in a country. So how can we put people around the table to establish discussions among the stakeholders with real figures and with methods that sometimes the private sector has? Which brings me to climate smart agriculture. I had the chance to be in Davos last month, where we were co-convening with some other partners a dinner for decision makers from the public and the private sector on climate smart agriculture, with I think the idea of finding a way to put agriculture on the agenda of the Paris Treaty. And I think there are two reasons for that. Well, there is a reason and an opportunity. What we eat today, which results into our agriculture all around the world, produces between 20 and 30% of the greenhouse gases emissions. If we don't do anything on our food system, by 2050, if we manage to keep a world, a +2 degrees world with the other sectors, what we eat will represent 70% of our emissions. And we can't let that happen. I mean, we would not be professionals. I mean, those of us who work on the agricultural sector. So there's a clear need to be a bit smarter on how we combine agriculture and climate. And so far, every time agriculture has been put on the table of the climate negotiation, it has been a fierce fight between countries from the south and countries from the north, because each camp defend either mitigation or adaptation to climate change. And I think the beauty of this concept that we call climate smart agriculture is to combine mitigation and adaptation and food security to establish productive, climate adapted, and less emitting production systems that provide income to farmers. And I think that's key to convince the different parties in Paris to bring things forward. But we can't do that alone, because we know today that the private sector has a lot of the solutions. They have started moving, they have started investing on such things, and so we are just starting working with the private sector, and especially the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, on trying to develop, I would say, business-oriented solutions where there will be the funding required to make those changes happen. just one example of how sometimes the private sector can be innovative in our sector. I was 2 weeks ago in the launch of a new fund, new investment fund in Paris, which is a joint venture between Danone and your North American Mars company. It will be a 120 million euro investment fund from private investors who put money in systems where they do scaling up of small projects for small farmers. It's a fund for family farming. And those investors are putting money there because they know they will get money back through carbon credits, through quality sourced products for fragrance, for food, and so on, and for beverages, for milk, and so on and so forth. That's a huge amount of money that the private sector puts there. And I think those are the types of solutions that we are trying to explore these days, because we know that only the public powers won't suffice to, well, avoid that our food tomorrow represents 70% of our emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.